Welcome back, everybody. Let's get political today. I'll put on my Tim Russert tie and we'll do some highlights from yesterday's primary election and catch up on some of the flurry of activity on Goat Hill. My name's Ike Morgan, and I'm so glad you're with us down in Alabama. The highest profile congressional primary in Alabama was a race between two sitting congressmen. For the GOP's nomination in Alabama's 1st Congressional District, Barry Moore of Enterprise defeated incumbent Jerry Carl of Mobile in what had become a pretty contentious race. Moore is currently representing Alabama 2, but after a court-ordered redrawing of the congressional map, he found himself living in Alabama 1, which is Carl's district. The shape of Alabama 1 now runs horizontally along the very bottom of the state. What likely pushed Moore to victory was that his Wiregrass area counties turned out stronger than Carl's coastal Alabama counties, and Moore carried around 80% of the Republican vote in the Wiregrass. Now, in the other half of that redistricting, we have Alabama's 2nd Congressional District. Moore is currently representing that district, but was redrawn into Alabama 1. Meanwhile, the whole point of the redistricting was so that black voters would likely have an upper hand in electing a candidate of their choice. In other words, we're a whole lot more likely to see a second Democrat join Alabama 7's Terry Sewell and represent Alabama in the U.S. House of Representatives next year. Now, that would flip a seat in the House to the Democrats. Running to stop that flip will be either former state lawmaker Dick Brubaker or attorney Caroline Dodson, who led the field last night and will face each other in the April 16th runoff. Now, there will also be a runoff on the Democratic side between Shomari Figures and Anthony Daniels. Now, Figures worked in the Obama administration, and Daniels is the state House Minority Leader. Daniels also lives in Huntsville, way outside Alabama too, but he's from Bullock County and says he's maintained family ties there. Now, don't assume this flip. According to the Alabama Secretary of State's website last night, and I know this isn't a real scientific sample of who's going to show up in the general election, but the numbers of Republican and Democrat ballots voting on this campaign were really close. There were more cast on the Democrat side, but by only 161 votes. Now, here are a few other quick hits from Super Tuesday in Alabama. Because 2020 was so much fun, like most states, we voted to send delegates to the conventions representing President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Now, they'll bring an amazing 159 years of combined life experience to the race for U.S. president. Now, Alabama's Constitution doesn't allow judges to be elected after the age of 70. So Supreme Court Chief Justice Tom Parker has to step aside. On Tuesday, Associate Justice Sarah Stewart won the GOP primary to become the nominee for Chief Justice. Now, she'll face Democratic Circuit Judge Greg Griffin in the general. And speaking of statewide elections, just how secure are Republicans these days? Well, this might not be the best measure, but it's the most recent. Last night, according to the Alabama Secretary of State's website, more than 500,000 Alabamians voted for Republican presidential candidates. Fewer than 200,000 voted for Democratic candidates. Again, not a perfect measure. We could probably spend a whole podcast exploring that statistically. Well, the Alabama state legislature has not slowed down for the primary election. To the contrary, you might see some big movement on high-profile bills this week. Lawmakers meet today, and they could give final passage to a bill protecting in vitro fertilization clinics from legal action, reports AL.com's Mike Hayson. Last week, the House and Senate passed their own versions of the bill, and yesterday, committees in both chambers were able to hammer out identical versions. The sooner they get a bill to the governor's desk, the sooner some of the closed IVF clinics might open back up. Meanwhile, when the Senate went into recess on Tuesday, the Education Budget Committee went ahead and approved the CHOOSE Act, reports the Alabama Reflector. Now, that's the school choice bill that reporter Tricia Powell-Crane and I talked about on Monday. That one was expected to come up in committee today. Instead, it's ready for the full Senate. And one more topic, friends and neighbors. For now, the don't ever bet on gambling in Alabama principle is firmly in effect. Now, that doesn't mean a lottery is dead again just yet, however. Ambitious legislation rattling around Goat Hill this session has included the familiar lottery, casinos, and sports betting. Initially, we felt a little political momentum behind it when it passed the House, but that was about 3 weeks ago. A Senate committee on Tuesday approved a version that excludes the casinos and sports betting. In other words, it's now a lottery bill, which may give it a fighting chance. But because it has to be a constitutional amendment, it still needs 3/5 of the full Senate, 3/5 of the House, the governor's signature, and statewide voter approval during a special election on September the 10th. That special election is a change in this version of the legislation. Senate sponsor Greg Albritton, an Atmore Republican, said that was necessary to get the needed votes. All right, well, that's enough for now. Thank y'all so much for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, y'all come see what we're doing on the internet at al.com.